nanay na. Lalaki daw, kaya third party
Ate
daw. Sana
Natalia.
naman yung women.
Mabuo na jud ko ano. Hala. It's proven. It's true.
Moira and Jason are not talking as of now, Doc, apart from their
Uh,
announcement, but they're not really
but
confirmed.
the picture which was shown by Christian Gaza
Gaza.
was true.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Because after the while preparing scene, while Ibon is preparing, because after the oral defense last night, kinahuman may mga 8 kapin, 8 p.m. I tried to open my Facebook account and then I read about it in the page of DJ Chacha. Then I opened and I asked my sister-in-law if it is true and then she said that it's true. So, oh, I'm sad also about
It's so
it.
sad. Si Reed, Doc. Gama. Uy, si Reed.
Yeah, I saw your profile pic this afternoon, and then your aura basa imong profile pic, and then when I heard your voice talking, I remember Moira. If that's a guy, so watch out mo girls, because it's not only the women who will be your rival. It could be the males. Oh, kapait no? It's really saddening and frustrating. Because I also idolize her because she's koan man. She's for me she's a good girl. Pait no. If that is true ba, so who is the real guy there?
There have been
Is Jason?
speculations naman daw, Doc. Nadugay na dyan daw kuno na, Doc. Yeah.
So maybe for me no, maybe Moira was just kampante ra gyud siya because it's a guy, it's just a friend. Nga na siguro no.
Best friend, Doc.
Oh, best friend.
Pag-ingat sa mga best friend, best friend.
Ano no. Makuha sa tano kanang makating sa taba nga more siya alarming sa part sa ato and also affected pud ba ya kay we are followers niya bago pagod sila gikasal unlike sa mga relationships which have breakups mga dagko lang mga anak pero kana is the marriage happened very very kuan pa no kuan pa kay ba ka ng pag-ura. Oh, sige lang makimarites lang ko ana later sa after sa akong matrabaho una na ako to panigabi akong oral defense akong estudyante. Sige, thank you.
Go, Ivan.
Okay, so okay. Excuse me, am I heard?
Yes,
Sorry po,
Ron.
'cause
Miss.
very sorry guys, please do bear with me. Calls or signal out of the moment. Okay, so again, a pleasant afternoon everyone. My name is Yvonne Hilary Molina for those who don't know me yet. And for today, we will be continuing the discussion we had in our previous meeting, which is the literature entitled Pride and Prejudice. So yes, I'll be talking to you guys the major themes and the morals from this certain literature. So before that, guys, I just want to say that this certain literature is very beautiful. It is very relatable and really greatly appreciated upon, especially to us, no, because we are in this age range already from 19 and beyond, where we are very curious in what so we call love. No, when it comes to our love or to different types of love, we have this strong interest to which, because again, each and every one of us maybe have different experiences and love story to be told by everybody. But this certain literature, guys, give us the understanding that sometimes love can fade away. Love can sometimes be a failure. It really depends to the people and how they were going to handle their relationship so that it can lead to a successful relationship. So, but remember, even though there was a lot of circumstances, a lot of obstacles along your way or your journey of loving each other, but if God permits or God set for you to be together, then whatever circumstances it was, you will become a perfect couple. You will have a successful relationship at the end. And somehow that is a good analysis in this certain topic. So pretty much for that. Now let's move on to the major theme. Next slide po please. At the Mitch. Okay, so we have here the first major theme, which is very dominant from the list. That is love and marriage. The novel focuses on the different ways love may grow or disappear, and whether or not society has room for romantic love and marriage to go together. So just like what I said a while ago, guys, there was a lot of different love stories. It can be successful or it can be a failure somehow. Because we cannot say what would be the run of your relationship until the very end. So sometimes the circumstances, the obstacles became the obstacle for you to have a unsuccessful relationship, a separation that will lead to separation or heartbreak or whatever it is. So that is somehow one of the themes which is dominant from the novel. At first, they have this unsuccessful perception with one another. Dahil kay Elizabeth, no? They have this pride and prejudice within them. So that's why they limit themselves or they give themselves a boundary to love each other. So you know what, guys? If you really wanted to love, a certain person, you should be open-minded in learning the whole truth about that certain person. Don't ever conclude first. Don't ever be judgmental, without knowing the whole truth. Because obviously, it really leads to a unsuccessful relationship. So, but it's a nature. Life given us that kind of nature. Sometimes we have this successful love, but sometimes it was unsuccessful in a way that it gave us a heartbreak. And I know, guys, that you can relate to this because maybe you yourself try to catch yourself na maybe you undergo with a relationship but it doesn't last for so long. It doesn't last or it doesn't give you that certain fulfillment. That will lead you to break up. Not knowing that sometimes there was a failing love. And maybe I can say that I am a living specific aspect. For I am a product of a broken family. I know you are aware to that certain story already, no? My mom and dad separated when I was in first grade. And, as a children, with that separated parents, it was hard at the very first place. You need to adjust, everything when it comes to, I am very used to have my mother to do anything for us, but in a sudden reason, we became separated. So it's very hard. But you just need to make that situation as your motivation to keep going. Don't make that certain aspect to stop you in living your life and living your dreams. And that is just a small takeaway I have. So from that note, sometimes there was a failing love, failing relationship, but don't ever give up on someone that you really love. Fight for her or for him. Because I know it will be fruitful in the very end. Especially if that person set for you to have, or God set that certain person to be your partner. Because definitely you can make a better match. So that is the love and marriage. There was a different love that will lead you to a success relationship, success marriage, but sometimes it also lead us to an unsuccessful, relationship that will lead to heartbreak and separation or divorce rather. So that is one of the major themes. Now let's proceed to the second one. Next slide po please. We have here the social status. So, segregation of the society into wealthy, better educated individuals and the lowly lady is still relevant. In the novel, Caroline Bingley looks down on the Bennets as people with vulgar manners, low sense, and lower social status. So yes, guys, another meaning now. It's a sad reality that this is another meaning of what we call love. If we are talking about love, then it was somehow tied up with what we call social status. If you are wealthy people, then you should just mingle. You should just date a wealthy people, the same social status as yours. A professional people, a well-educated people. That is the standard of the society where we belong right now. But if you are poor, then you are just, put boundaries that you should just date a poor people. And if you tend to analyze that aspect, guys, it doesn't make sense at all. Because as we all know, love moves in Love move in unexpected way. Love move in unpredictable ways rather. We cannot force ourselves to love someone. So once you felt spark or once you felt something very special to someone, even they have different social status than yours, then try to pursue that love. Don't be hesitant. Don't be doubtful to pursue that love that you have for her or for him. And again, the society just have that certain nature. A lot of people have criticism, a lot of judgment, and we cannot force them to please us. We cannot force them to agree with our relationship, especially if your partner is different of yours when it comes to the social status. So at the end of the day, it's a relationship, it's a love. So just cancel criticism, opinions of other people. Don't let social status be the hinder, be the obstacles of your certain. Again, is no certain person is God, given you or God set for you to be your perfect match. Then try to fight for it no matter what happens. Try to fight for it no matter what people told you. Because at the end of the day, you are the one, feeling the genuine happiness from that relationship, not the other people. So in the certain literature, this social status becomes their obstacle between Darcy and Elizabeth. Darcy is from the wealthy family, and then however, Elizabeth is from the poor family. And because of that, they have different perceptions. It's obvious already, but they have different perception, different kind of living. So they perceive that they can be a perfect couple. They can be a perfect match. So at very first, it became their hindrances. They don't want to be with each other. Again, besides of their pride and prejudice, dominate inside of them, they have their social status as well. That somehow hinder them to pursue the love that they don't know in the very end, very worthy, very fulfilling. So yes, that is the major thing, which is the social status. Now let's move on to the morals. That's like, am I still heard, guys? Am I still finished?
Yes po.
Thank you. Sorry, Kaya. Okay, so now let's proceed to the morals. So again, guys, just what I told you a while ago. If we are appreciating a certain literature, we should always be mindful to be focused on the morals, so the lessons that we should take away, and we can definitely use as a strength in our daily life. Because most of the morals we can get from different literature that we are, appreciating upon is very relatable to the real life situation. And I can say really the pride and prejudice morals or last we can have is also very relatable that really exists in real life scenarios. So we have here the first moral, like okay, so first moral we have here, don't make snap judgments. Don't judge the proverbial book by its cover. This lesson is as important as ever, particularly for teachers. Don't let first impressions dictate your approach to a subject or to a student. Don't shy away from something because you feel it. Try to view it from a different perspective, which is definitely true. Most that stand and most of the morals now says that don't make a snap judgment. Don't ever conclude into something without knowing the whole truth. Don't conclude or judge something just by having the half truth of the situation or the certain person. Because definitely you can conclude negatively. You can conclude wrongly to a certain person or to a certain situation. So remember guys, you as a literate individual, as a well-educated individual, don't ever engage yourself to snap judgment. And don't make your what do you call this? Don't make your first impression last so long. Yes, it's true that we as a human individual, we have this ability to have a first impression. Like if we saw a certain person, we have this perception already na she's maldita or whatever based on the way that certain person was originally. But don't make that last forever. Try to, know the whole truth first. Try to know the whole perspective of that certain person before you conclude before you judge into something so that it will be fair to everyone. Because again, guys, I am a victim of certain situation. A lot of people are always concluding negatively about me without knowing me personally. And that's true. I am, engaging right now. Uh, a lot of people perceive me as my diva, the way others I cannot talk as much, which is definitely I don't know if it's true, but I am very introvert. I'm shy, especially if you are strangers. So if you don't listen, it can make a move to have a conversation and not be. But because of that and the way I look, the way I myself, people perceive me as that way. People conclude on me negatively, which is unfair to me. Guys, you don't know me, just don't conclude. Don't make us. You should first know the whole truth so that you can hurt somebody. That is the thing that we should work upon ourselves. And even myself, I always teach myself to, don't make us not judgmental. It is really fantastic. Don't make us not that. So in the literature, Darcy and Elizabeth has this first impression. They make us not judgment about each other, which is they don't know it doesn't make sense at all at the end. Because now from the plan that Ms. Salem and Ms. Corey given you during our previous meeting, it says there that at the very end, they realize that Darcy and Elizabeth make a good couple, compromises their differences, and make the bridge from each set. No, so you not judge because need will a lot of regret. So you should always be know the truth. You should know what really happened or why they and have a fair judgment. So make us not judgment. Now let's look at the last and the second morals of this certain literature. Next slide po please. Oh. Okay. That's cipher. Am I still here?
Choppy Von.
Guys, okay. Am I still here right now?
Yes, yes.
Am I heard? Am I still heard?
Yes, Von.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry guys, sorry po. I'm really struggling as of the moment talaga. Okay, so at my end no, the slides doesn't move at all. But I will just read no. The second one we have here is don't be prideful and judgmental towards others. Okay, so in the slide on your end, guys, is it don't be prideful or is it still don't make snap judgment?
Don't be prideful and judgmental.
Okay, and ako already ay. Okay, don't be prideful and judgmental towards others. So Elizabeth and Darcy are inclined to the bottom one another initially. Darcy is prejudice against the police, black, the sensitive attitude. In Lisbeth Linda parodied her against me, and actually, they became learn to overcome the flaws and how much they are. So this is the last morals that are included for this in literature. Don't be prideful and judgmental towards. You know what, guys? If you really wanted, or if you wanted to have a successful relationship, don't make pride or the feeling of pride dominate you because it will just lead you to a bad person, as you can be. It can lead you to a negative, personality or person you are. So always over your pride in a certain relationship. You should know how to understand. You should know how to be open and accepting what do you call this? Accepting the reason of your partner. Especially if your partner make a mistake and it hurts you so much or so badly. Don't be close already. Don't cut the relationship already. Don't what do you call this, conclude for a breakup already. But you should lower your pride. You should know how to accept the reason of your partner, and that's the time you should conclude if you will have a breakup or not. Because maybe again, if you don't know how to, it will give you a lot of learning. So always don't be successful. If you really wanted to have a certain successful relationship. At the same time, don't be judgmental. Again, guys, this is very important. Being judgmental became the nature. A lot of people became or always be judged judgmental towards others. That's became the nature of them. So we as a individual who are well educated, we should change that certain aspect within ourselves. Don't make a snap judgment. Don't conclude into something without knowing the whole truth, and don't mingle or somehow mingle on the business of other people. Because again, it will just lead us to a negative conclusion, negative results of our action. Just like in the literature, no. At first, Darcy and Elizabeth has this pride within themselves and the prejudice at the same time. And then that's the thing that hinders them to explore and to appreciate the good attributes of each other, view that makes them fall in love with each other. But at the end, they realize that they really make a good couple. Now, their compromises, their differences, they are well matched from each other. Once they lower their pride, once they understand each other, they don't, they stop this judgmental aspect within themselves. And they realize that they are really for each other. No, so at the end, that's the time that they realize that they make a perfect couple. But at the very first place, because of the domination of pride, the domination of judgmental and negative thoughts within them, so it became their obstacles. It became their so you guys, especially to us, since we're already in the age where we wanted to we wanted to be in a relationship, to love someone that we love, to be loved back, to crush back by our crush, or whatsoever it is, no, we should always lower our pride. Especially if your partner tends to commit a mistake. Accept reasons. Accept reasons, try to understand, and make a compromise. Because at the end of the day, you are the one benefiting on that certain action. So yes, just don't be prideful. That's the more of the Pride and Prejudice. Thank you for listening, guys. And may I call Miss Golbolingo for the continuation of our report.
All right. So thank you so much for that wonderful insights about morals and things, Miss Molina. So now we are going to move on to the literary devices and the analysis of the story with Pride and Prejudice. So next slide, Miss. So we have the first one here. Next slide po, Miss George. All right, so we have here the spotted literary devices that were used in the story. First, the first one is foreshadowing. Second is metaphors, simile, imagery, hyperbole, and the irony and symbolism. So let us try to chat first about the foreshadowing in the story. So next slide, Miss George. All right. So in the story Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen masterfully opens the novel by stating that it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. So why do we say that it actually encounters with foreshadowing? So first, basically, it because the opening line foreshadows the societal views of the time period and hence allows the reader to have a prior understanding of the course of the story. In addition, the reader is aware of Mrs. Bennet's principle behind her drive to marry off her daughters. So there we could see that Jane Austen uses foreshadowing. At the same time, the novel relies on the existence of suspense about how conflicts will be resolved. So, for example, will Jane and Bingley be able to marry? So, will Lydia's elopement be legitimized by legal marriage? So too much foreshadowing actually might diminish the suspense. However, Jane Austen is also interested in showing how characters can be blind to important information, and the use of foreshadowing allows her to show individuals failing to notice clues that were right in front of them. Okay, so before moving on to the next type of literary devices, I would like to ask any our classmates if you are still listening to us. Kindly chat one in our chat box if you are still listening to me. Kindly type one in our chat box if you are still listening to me. I haven't seen any. Okay, Miss Molina have yes, Miss Bonga Ayuman. Okay, so that means my classmates are listening to me. So for those who are sleeping or feeling sleepy, do a little bit of stretching, and yes, you will be awakened. I will also try my best to louder my voice so that you will not be sleeping when I am reporting because I feel you guys. Okay. So the next literary devices, or I mean the foreshadowing, balik sa te, I'm sorry. is the marriage of Charlotte Lucas and Mr. Collins. So, in this area, when Elizabeth learns that Charlotte is going to marry Mr. Collins, she is completely shocked. However, Austen. Alright, so I'm sorry for that one. When Elizabeth learns that Charlotte is going to marry Mr. Collins, she is completely shocked. However, Austen has actually foreshadowed this event. So Charlotte has already shown a very practical and possibly even cynical perspective on marriage. The next one is Lydia's elopement. So under Lydia's elopement, the shocking event of Lydia running away with Wickham is foreshadowed when Elizabeth learns from Darcy that Wickham had previously tried to elope with Georgiana Darcy. So Georgiana Darcy was the sister of Mr. Darcy, who is the main character or is one of the main character of the story. So learning this part of Wickham's history dramatically changes the way Elizabeth thinks about his character. Because if you're familiar with the movie, Elizabeth is actually she feels amazement towards Mr. Wickham, but when Mr. Darcy have told her the history about Mr. Wickham, then she got the idea already of what Mr. Wickham was like. So yes, because of that, this shows foreshadows in the story as well. Okay, next slide, Miss. Okay, next is the metaphor. Under the chapter 9, if you're going to read the book, so it was under chapter 9 when it was stated, I wonder who first discovered the efficacy of poetry in driving away love. I have been used to consider poetry as the food of love, said Darcy. I've a fine stout, healthy love it may, everything nourishes what is strong already, but if it be only a slight, thin short of inclination, I am convinced that one good sonnet will starve it entirely away. So one hint for us to remember that a metaphor is actually showing comparison but without like or as or anything na mag-give of clues to us. So that is why you can see here under this lines in the story. So to dig it deeply, so when Elizabeth makes a joke about poetry pushing love away, Darcy contradicts her by alluding to the play Twelfth Night, in which Shakespeare used a metaphor to compare music to the food of love. So mo siya yung i-compare din guys. So he compared music to the food of love because it nourishes and grows romantic relationships. However, Elizabeth counters that while poetry might feed strong love, one good sonnet would kill a weaker inclination. O, diba? If you're going to watch the movie, guys, even just for one time, then you will really fall in love with the movie. It is very much a very beautiful movie and full of poetry and literature. So I encourage you guys to watch it. Next one is the simile. Alright, under chapter 40 of the book, so your profusion makes me save, and if you lament over him much longer, my heart will be as light as a feather. So, diba? As what I've told you, comparison or simile is the same. But one clue for us to remember when looking for simile in the story is using the comparison terms. Just like, for example, the like, the as, and so on. Diba? So, in this simile, Elizabeth compares her heart to a feather after she tells Jane how she has misjudged both Darcy's and Mr. Wickham's characters. Because Jane's distress at her misapprehension is so sincere that it humbles and unburdens Elizabeth of some of her guilt about her treatment of Darcy. So as Jane is showing remorse over the grief that Mr. Darcy must have felt after being rejected by Elizabeth, so this is actually comparing her heart to a feather. So, diba, you know a feather. Diba, a feather is a very feather or feeder. I did not, sorry. Please correct me. Ate Cheryl, how to pronounce it correctly. I'm actually in doubt. Feather or feeder? I think it's feather. Ate Cheryl, my grammar. Guys, am I still heard?
Yes, MJ.
Yes.
Yes, please correct me. What is it? Feather or feather? Naglibog ko, please.
Feather.
Okay, thank you, sure. Okay, thank you, classmates. Okay, naglibog radyo ko. Sorry, guys.
Okay, Rana.
Okay, so... okay, so next is the imagery. So, di ba? Ato ni siyang usa-usahan ng literary devices, everyone. So for the imagery, through a, uh, through a vivid description of scenes that take place in the novel, the reader can get in view of many ideas regarding the social background of the novel. So first, when we have read there that as a gentleman had joined the ladies. Okay, here's what you're going to do, guys. Try to, as I read these lines, you have to close your eyes and imagine every details that I will be mentioning here because imagery is something that we have to figure out. Okay, so also that you can relate as well. Dili lang kaya ako may yo din here and just using my thoughts. So I also encourage everyone, okay? So as the gentleman had joined the ladies, tea was over the card tables were placed. Scarcely a syllable was uttered. That did not relate to the game. A great deal more passed at the other table. So Lady Catherine comes, was generally speaking stating the mistakes of the three others, or relating some anecdotes of herself, where Sir William Wickham did not say much. So diba, I would like to ask, what can you figure out in the story? It's time for you to share your thoughts and relate. And so you na figure out, when I say the gentleman had joined the ladies, the tea was over, and the card tables were placed. So, ang sa inyo ma-figure out na guys? Feel free to share. Come on, don't be shy. Kalma lang, ako man to. Anybody? Any brave souls from our class? Yes, Miss Balino, please. I want you to unmute your mic and please share your thought. Miss Balino, Miss Rhea. Alright, how about others? I will not proceed to the next one if you are not going to speak. I wanted to hear your lovely voice, everyone. Why brave soul during the pita? Should I call a volunteer? Should I call a volunteer, guys? Okay, Mr. Putrido, ikaw dyan ako nakita ni first akong screen. So what can you figure out here?
I think that when the gentleman had joined the lady, the table was already prepared and they were about to do something.
What is that something? Mr. Shirley, are you still there?
ASMG, maybe a dance or a ball something.
Okay, so thank you so much for that, Mr. Putrido. Actually, your answer is right, and it actually gives us a very wonderful image. Okay, so yes, we could see here that that something refers to as dance, diba? For example, then they're actually offering the teas or some sort of talking with each other, some sort of discussing, like something like that. So yeah, that is actually just a very simple. Okay, so in here, so let me now share my insight for this imagery. So often uses comparison in order to create imagery in the event. So the moods of the two tables are different. One is dull and quiet, while the other is lively. So readers may feel as if they are in the scene themselves. So diba, ako I will be giving an example for myself. So once when I read these lines, I feel that I was in a scenario. O diba, at least na-feel na ako, nakauban ako si Mr. Darcy. Oh, at least in my dreams, nakauban ako siya. And then, Jane Austen uses only little imagery in Pride and Prejudice, instead focusing on realism, precision, and dialogue. In the phrase, Elizabeth made no answer and walked on her heart swelling with indignation. So, for example, when Miss Lucas, in the Pride, Miss Lucas does not offend me so much as pride often does. So in this case, pride is given human attributes suggesting the significance of pride in the novel. Okay, so moving on, we have, so too much about imagery, let's move on to personification. So from the root word, diba, when we say personification, it means giving giving life to those things, or giving life to the things nga dili siya kana. For example, when we say trees are dancing, so that's example of personification. So what is personification in the story? So of course, After Jane receives the letter that confirmed that Mr. Bingley would remain in London all winter, Jane expresses her sorrow for her sister as her heart was divided between concern for her sister and resentment against all the others. So anyone from our class would spot what phrase here shows personification. Anyone? Asa din nga line or asang phrase diha nga nag-show personification.
Her heart was divided.
Very good. Yes, exactly, Matthew. Her heart was divided. Nga naman, ma-divide ato ang heart in reality. Maybe you can divide your heart when you are feeling feelings only, pero in reality it is not possible, di ba? So a very good answer from Mr. Balucas. So genius you can si Mr. Balucas. Next miss is hyperbole. Okay, when we say hyperbole, our term here is exaggerating or exaggeration. So, in the story Pride and Prejudice, I am sure she added, if it was not for such good friends, I do not know what would become of her. For she is very ill indeed and suffers a vast deal, though with the greatest patience in the world. So, anybody would spot the hyperbole here? Naaba or wala?
Greatest patience in the world.
Yeah, that is one. Actually, there are many hyperbole in this statement. That is one, Mr. Balucas. I love the enthusiasm of Mr. Balucas. How about the others?
She
A vast
is
deal.
very ill indeed and suffers a vast deal, though with
Yes. Uy, ganahan lagi ko sa panganang answers rin. Very good, Miss Francille. Okay, a very good answer. So, di ba? Mo to siya, guys. The first one here is the very greatest patience, and the second one is suffers a vast deal, di ba? So brilliant kanya ako mga classmates, so I don't need to elaborate more about it. And my explanation for this part is here Mrs. Bennet is exaggerating Jane's illness, di ba, making it seem like Jane is dying. I'm sorry for that, guys. Okay, so where am I? Sorry. Making it seem like Jane is dying, but Mrs. Bennet also frequently exaggerates her own suffering. So, di ba, Mrs. Bennet is the mother of the 5 daughters, di ba? Nila Jane, nila Elizabeth, and many more. Okay, so another example here is her manners were pronounced to be very bad indeed, a mixture of pride and impertinence. She had no conversation, no style, no beauty. Okay, I found it very a bit confusing. So anyone from her class could spot the hyperbole here. Anyone? What phrase shows the hyperbole here?
Very bad indeed.
Very bad indeed. Yes. Yes, sakto ma. Thank you. Okay. Yes, exactly. So that is actually right. When we say very bad indeed, to the point nga napaisumpay nga ko, di ba, nga example, a mixture of pride and pertinence. She had no conversation. Can you imagine that? No style, no beauty. Okay, so if you're going to think of it, it's actually it seems like really exaggerating. It's not anymore realistic. Di ba? Ang tao, even if we can't utter a single word in a day, it seems like a very difficult thing for us to do. Except if you're a monk, you can actually do that thing. Okay, so here in this case, it emphasizes the unpleasant manners of Miss Bingley and her strong dislike of Elizabeth. Okay, next one is, second to the last, is irony. Okay, when we say irony, it actually shows kanang contrast, di ba? So, for example, towards the beginning of Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy's relationship, Mr. Darcy claims that Elizabeth is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt him. Diba? Why is it showing irony in the story? Because in the first place, Elizabeth have shared in one part of the movie or in the story nga, kahit na kanaganing thought na bahala na ka ng maubusan kong lalaki or magkuan kog kanam hutdan kong lalaki in the world, but I will never you will never be my husband. But in the end, Elizabeth became Elizabeth fall with Mr. Darcy, di ba? So the same thing with us, we should not speak words na dito mag-speak ng words na wapata na kay agi kay sometimes mahitabo na siya ng mga butang. Okay, next one is, okay, so the explanation for this is when this statement is reflected back, it is ironic that a woman who is not able to charm a man to dance is suitable enough to marry. This shows the dynamic character of Mr. Darcy, as he is less prideful and egoistic after he proposes for the second time to Miss Elizabeth. So the irony that is associated with Mr. Darcy is pertinent role in the development of the plot. Next, the last one is symbolism. Okay, so I will be trying my best to be quick so that others can still report. When Elizabeth first visits Pemberley, she describes it as a large, handsome stone building, standing well on rising ground, and in front, a stream of some natural importance was swelled into greater, but without any artificial appearance. Its banks were neither formal nor forcefully adorned. Okay, so this is written figuratively as a symbol of the person who owns it. The stream signifies Darcy himself, as Darcy morally stands on a higher level. Diba? Mr. Darcy was from a higher or from a noble family, while his boastful personality swells. Diba? And contributes to his importance as a character, but yet he is genuine in his intentions. Kay, we have this common impression that pag once a person is rich, then sometimes it was associated with their attitudes na di ka aya-aya. But it is not for all guys. There were some who are rich but with a good heart as well. Okay, so this is just a sort of symbolism here in this story. And now we are going to move on to the analysis of the story. Okay, next slide, Miss George. So are you still there, guys? Are you still listening to me? Please type 2 in our chat box if you're still listening. Kindly chat 2 in our chat box if you're still listening. Okay, Miss Tundag is very active. Miss Balino, Ayuman, Kambaya, Miss Molina, Mirasol, Sibonga, Kieros, Rosal. Okay, Mr. Balucas, thank you so much everyone for your response. Okay, to move on with the analysis of the story, the plot of Pride and Prejudice follows a linear chronological structure. Please proceed to the next slide, Miss George. I am already talking to the next slide. Okay, thank you. So Elizabeth Bennet is the protagonist, and the major conflict revolves around her struggle to find a compatible husband despite the obstacles presented by both social conventions and her own lack of self-awareness. So she encounters a number of antagonists actually who create obstacles between her and a happy marriage. These antagonists can be classified into 2 groups. Okay, who are those? The first are the characters who threaten Elizabeth's future happiness by trying to persuade her to marry the wrong man. These include Mrs. Bennet, who did not understand the kind of marriage her daughter wants and thinks Elizabeth should lower her standards, and Mr. Collins, who tries to convince Elizabeth to accept a marriage that would never satisfy her. Mr. Collins was a old man na ginahan si Elizabeth and Mary but is not into her, so she declined. And the second group of antagonists are the characters who try to prevent Elizabeth's marriage to Darcy, notably Miss Bingley and Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Because, for some reasons, and there are times when Elizabeth functions as her own antagonist, her stubbornness and inability to understand that Darcy would be a good match for her moves for her further away from her goal of happiness rather than toward it. So, finally, guys, the conclusion for our story here is Elizabeth is the type of woman who always follows her will just for the sake of her own happiness. She is willing to take the risk nga she will not be able to marry as long as she will be in the right man. So she is always willing to wait, and she is very much eager to discern who is really for her. And because of that, everyone, I would like to give you a very concise analysis from one video that I found very reliable. Miss George, please present the video, and thank you so much for listening, everyone. Have a great day. Please ka sa video, te.
Pride and Prejudice is one of the most beloved novels in all of literature, not just because it's a great love story, but also because it tackles social norms, such as class and reputation within English society. Through the protagonist, Elizabeth Bennet, generations of readers have learned the importance of staying true to themselves. Jane Austen was born on December 16, 1775, in Steventon, Hampshire, England. When Austen was in her early 20s, she wrote a novel called First Impressions. This was the basis for the book that eventually became Pride and Prejudice. It was submitted to a publisher but rejected. Austen later revised the manuscript and changed the title. The English publisher, Thomas Egerton, released the book in 1813 under Austen's pen name, A Lady. The first printing of the book sold out and would become Austen's most popular novel. It was only upon her death that her brother Henry revealed her authorship. She died on July 18, 1817, at the age of 41 and is buried at Winchester Cathedral. Despite the enormous and continuing popularity of her books, her tombstone makes no mention of her role as a writer. Pride and Prejudice was composed in England's Georgian era, but revised during the Regency era. During this time, the English were worried Napoleon Bonaparte would cross the English Channel. In response, militias formed around the country. One of the postings was in Meryton, where most of the novel takes place. It's also important to note that England was entering the Industrial Revolution, making it possible for commoners to accumulate massive wealth via trade and manufacturing. Pride and Prejudice's plot follows women of the gentry in search of a husband. Social classes were distinguished by who had land, wealth, and title. Although different classes socialized with one another, it was uncommon for landed gentry and nobility to marry beneath their social class. The story follows the Bennet sisters in their attempts to be married. It starts with Charles Bingley moving into the neighborhood. Jane Bennet and Charles Bingley are interested in one another. Elizabeth Bennet and Bingley's friend Darcy don't really hit it off at first. Jane and Bingley spend more time together, and through social events, Darcy grows fond of Elizabeth. But he's worried the Bennets are too low class. When Darcy proposes to Elizabeth, she rejects him. Darcy, despite the rejection, saves the Bennets from humiliation by paying the scoundrel Wickham to marry the youngest Bennet daughter, Lydia. Jane and Bingley marry, setting an example of a love match. Darcy proposes again, Elizabeth accepts, and they marry. Symbols in Pride and Prejudice include houses, which not only indicate social status, but also reflect their owner's character. Nature symbolizes freedom, where Elizabeth goes to escape the constraints of society. The three themes in Pride and Prejudice are social class, reputation, and love versus marriage. Social class. This is especially important as a social constraint on who you can marry. Reputation. This is especially important for females who are judged on etiquette and politeness. Love versus marriage. When marriage is viewed as a practical matter, love comes second. The impact of Pride and Prejudice on the literary world is undeniable. It has sold millions of copies and enjoyed film and TV adaptations, and been translated into dozens of languages. This timeless tale is destined to continue to capture readers' imaginations for generations to come.
Right, so that concludes our reporting based under Pride and Prejudice. Thank you so much for listening, guys.
Thank you, MG and group. We really enjoy the story on Pride and Prejudice. Next is Miss Balino's group.
So good afternoon once again. I am Reka Balino and today I'd like to share with you our chosen popular literature entitled A Walk to Remember. So I'm sure you're familiar with this story, but first let's learn about the author. Next slide please. Next slide po. Yes po. So Nicholas Sparks graduated from Notre Dame University in 1988 and is one of the most widely praised authors in his years. So he has written five best-selling books. Four of his books, which is The Message in a Battle, 1999, the novel A Walk to Remember, 2002, the Notebook, 2004, and Nights in Rodante, 2008. So all of his novels has been made into films or movie. So the story of A Walk to Remember, which is the subject of our discussion today, was released in October 1999. So Nicholas Sparks' story is very significant to him because it was inspired by her sister Danielle Spark Lewis, who died of cancer in June 2000. So although the story is mostly fictional, some parts are based on true events. So his sister, for example, was never popular at school and always wore an ugly sweater, just like Jamie. So she also carried the Bible with her everywhere she went. So like Jamie and London's story, her sister finds true love who is willing to pledge everlasting love despite the fact that she has no hope of living. So his sister's husband proposed to her despite her condition. So this story of Sparks is an example of how the so-called of life causes individuals to change. So here's the main character in the story, A Walk to Remember. Next slide po. So Mandy Moore as Jamie Sullivan, Shane West as Landon. Next slide po. David Lee Smith as Dr. Carter, father of Landon. Peter Coyote as Reverend Sullivan, the father of Jamie. Darrell Hannah as Cynthia Carter, mother of Landon. Al Thompson as Eric, best friend of Landon. That's all po. Now that we have some background on the author and the main character in the story, let's move on to the plot summary of the story based on the movie adaptation. So good afternoon once again. I'm Raya and I'm going to narrate the plot summary of the novel A Walk to Remember by Nicholas Sparks based on a movie adaptation. So the movie started when London's group convinced one of their fellow to jump off a pool, leading to a serious injury for him. Then the group panicked when a cops happened to witness the incident, and then they were being chased, particularly London. The reason why he is punished and has to participate in after-school activities like tutoring and spring musical where he meets Jamie Sullivan. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So to make the play right, London asks Jamie to help him with the play, and then Jamie, as a kind-hearted girl, agrees to do so, but with one condition, and that is avoid falling in love. So during this time, London also discovers Jamie's wish list. After a day after, Jamie approached London in school for a practice, and then London's friends are there watching and listening to their conversation, and maybe London got embarrassed that he was linked to the great Jamie, which is a weirdo girl ever since then, as they say. So London denies their relationship in front of his friends, and Jamie, as a result of that, refuses to help him with the play anymore. Next slide, please. So in the play, Jamie astounds London and the audience with her beauty and voice, singing Only Hope. And at the end of the play, London kisses Jamie, and London never apologizes with that because he started to fall in love to Jamie. The next morning, Jamie got played by the group of Eric, which angers London, resulting to violence. Next slide, please. So one time, Jamie reveals to London that she has leukemia. So at first, she wholeheartedly accepts the fact of she has ailment and her life is very short. But then, London happened, and the unexpected love blooms in between two persons. And Jamie doesn't want to have reasons to get angry with God because she's very faithful to God. She's very religious person. She always put God in the center in everything she do. She cannot just afford to blame, either hate God of all her sufferings because everything has reasons. After hearing the news, London lowered his pride, knocked on the door where his biological father is, that he hated for over years, just to seek help for Jamie's condition. And then as days pass by, Jamie's cancer gets worse. London is very eager to make Jamie happy, so he builds a big telescope for her and proposes for a marriage. Next slide, please. Expectedly, Jamie accepts the proposal from London, and he fulfills the first wish of Jamie, which is to be married in the church where her parents were married with people she knew. And then 4 years later, after Jamie passed away, London finished college and has been accepted in medical school.
The following is the differences between the novel and the movie adaptation, because there are some scenes in the novel that don't appear in the movie. So I go over some of those with you. So if we compare the book novel to the movie adaptation, we can see some significant changes made to this film. So to summarize everything that has been staged so far, there are several parts in the original novel that are not present in the film. Like for example, the date of when the movie takes place. When you watch the movie, you'll notice that it's set in the present day. So the filmmaker of this film, which was made between 2001 and 2002, decided to keep it current. However, in the book, the story takes place in the 1950s. So next is in the film, London's father is a doctor, and he abandoned both London and his mother when he was young. Meanwhile, in the book, London's father is a congressman and doesn't get along well with his father. So the following slide is the theme and the lesson of the story.
So the next slides contains themes and lessons of the story A Walk to Remember. The first one is love conquers differences. As we all know, diba, London and Jamie are different persons with diverse way of life, characters, and even personality. So Jamie, considered as a kind-hearted girl who always finds good things despite of bad situations. She is very faithful to God and engages herself to school activities to imprint memories so that people will not forget her. And then here comes a guy named London that was described as a popular bad boy, a rule breaker who always hangs out with bad peers. And then when two hearts collide, love happens. Because love conquers differences, just like what people say, opposite attracts. The next theme is love makes changes to London. Because of the miracle of love, London changed for the better. He started to ask for forgiveness to the people he wronged, from being rebellious to a kind and caring person. And with that, we can conclude now that love is very powerful magic ever exists. The last theme is love is everlasting. Losing someone you love doesn't always mean losing capability to love people. But bear in mind that love is always there because love is everlasting. Even though Jamie passed away, Landon always remember the times wherein he's being loved by the girl named Jamie Sullivan. I believe my group mates also want to share their thoughts or lessons about the story. Miss Bayogo.
Yes, so good afternoon. Um, one of the lessons conveyed by the story, a walk to remember is that life is short and we must value and cherish our loved ones while we still have time. As the saying say, tomorrow is never promised. We never know what tomorrow will be, so let's love the moment and value the love, and I mean value the one we love. Let's treat our loved ones nicely because we don't know how long they'll be able to live with us in this world. Also, to not have any regret. That's all, miss.
Miss Kalampang.
Alright, thank you so much. So let us value our loved ones. That's what napa mo? Continue pa mo? Napa,
Yes.
miss?
Yes po, miss. Yes po.
Okay, sige. Go ahead, go ahead.
Based from the story, I must say that the moral of the story is that appreciate every moment with the people you love and make the most out of it because we don't know when they will be gone in in our lives, just as how Landon and Jamie savor the remaining, just how Landon and Jamie savor the remaining moments of Jamie and created memories that he would never forget. Also, the movie really teaches us to respect one another and learn to love truly as well. So that's it for my moral.
Alright. Thank you, Miss Balino's group.
We're not po. Wala kami nahuman ate.
Sige,
Yes
sige.
po.
Sorry.
Miss Rosales.
Sige. So, the moral of the story is life is too short. As much as we can, we must cherish every single moment to the persons we love and make a good memories and also do everything that make us happy and do everything that is worth living for because we'll never know what tomorrows may bring or when will be our time will run out. Thank you.
So I also want to share my realization about this story po. So in life we have to somehow gamble and take the risk even though the percent of achieving our goals is lesser than expected. We have to keep on fighting and strengthen our own faith, and God will surely hear the determination of each heart because God listens not only to our words but to our hearts. Just be reminded that pain makes you stronger, even better. And then it's very okay to cry, as what Shanks in One Piece says, by experiencing both victory and defeat, running away and shedding tears, a man will become a man. It's okay to cry, but you have to move on. Cry a bucket of tears now and then move on later. Find your purpose and achieve the true meaning of happiness. And that concludes our discussion for today. Thank you.
Yeah, cry a bucket of tears and move on later, according to Miss Balino. Alright, so, okay na? Done na, Miss Balino?
Yes po.
Thank you so much for that. Let's move on to Robelin Tabal's group.
So, good afternoon, everyone. So, today's story is about the life of Pai, reporter, of course. I'm Riz Amazing Call together with my group mates, friends Nicole Sasutel, Joanna May Pacanya, April May Tabal, and Robelin Tabal. So, Life of Pai, it is a 2000 novel. It is a story of a 16-year-old boy who survives a shipwreck and is adrift in the Pacific Ocean on a lifeboat with a Bengal tiger. It is adapted into a movie in 2012, which won as many as 4 Oscars award. So next slide, please. So Life of Pi, it is a Canadian philosophical novel by Jan Martel, published in 2001. So Jan Martel, he is a Canadian author best known for Life of Pi. In 2001, Martel received international acclaim for Life of Pi, which features elements of fable, fantasy, and magic realism. The book was awarded the prestigious Booker Prize and was published in more than 30 languages. He was born in Salamanca, Spain in 1963 of Canadian parents who were doing graduate studies. His father, Nicole Perron, was a diplomat and a poet, while his mother, Emily Martel, was a writer and a Canadian diplomat. He obtained a degree in philosophy from Trent University in Ontario, then worked variously as a tree planter, dishwasher, and security guard before taking up writing full-time from the age of 27. He grew up in Costa Rica, France, Spain, and Mexico, in addition to Canada. He continued to travel widely as an adult, spending time in Iran, Turkey, and India, but is now based mainly in Montreal. Jan Martel spent his childhood living in different countries. His formal education started at Trinity College School, where he completed 2 years of his studies, followed by sorry guys, kaunagod ko. Followed by Trent University, where he completed his degree in philosophy. After completing graduation in 1985, he nurtured his writing passion and considered a career in politics as well. So, why did Jan Martel write The Life of Pi? So according to him, India influenced me to write Life of Pi. That said, Martel noted that ultimately it was his quest to understand the mechanism of religious faith that made him write the book. So next slide please. So Life of Pi, so the settings. Imagine being a child growing up in a zoo and later as a teenager becoming stranded on a lifeboat in the Pacific Ocean, eventually finding land only to discover it wants to literally eat you. This is exactly what happens to our protagonist in The Life of Pi, Paisin Molitor Patel, who we'll learn about in 5 significant settings which include the Pondicherry Zoo, the Pacific Ocean, the lifeboat, a carnivorous island, Mexico where Pi is rescued, and Canada where Pi makes a new life for himself. Of each of these settings, the Pacific Ocean is the most important as it's where the majority of the novel takes place. The Pondicherry Zoo and the carnivorous island are the next most significant settings because it's in those places that we learn about what Pi has lost, his home and family, and the additional danger he overcomes. The Pondicherry Zoo. The opening section of The Life of Pi is titled Pondicherry and Toronto, and in it we'll learn that Pi, now an adult, lives in Toronto, Canada. Although he loves Toronto, he misses India, the heat, the food, and the culture. In the following quote, Pi described his home, the zoo, and the animals. I have nothing but the fondest memories of growing up in a zoo. I lived the life of a prince. My alarm clock during my childhood was a pride of lions.
There were no Swiss clocks, but the lions could be counted upon to roll their heads off between 5:30 and 6 every morning. Breakfast was punctuated by shrieks and cries of howler monkeys, Halmaines, and Moluccan cockatoos. I left for school not only under the benevolent gaze of mother, but also of bright-eyed otters, and burly American bison as reaching and yawning orangutans. Pai goes on to describe pink flamingos, fruit bats, frogs, turtles, and myriad other animals, all of which he refers to as the riches he was privy to each day before school. To Pai, there was no better place than the Pondicherry Zoo, which he visits now only in his memory, as it has been shut down long since his family owned it. Next, we have the Pacific Ocean and the lifeboat. Due to the political climate in India, Pai's father decides to seal the zoo and sail to Canada along with some of the animals. While at sea, the ship's engine fails and the ship, along with nearly all of its inhabitants, sinks. We know, however, that Pai and four animals survive: an orangutan named Orange Juice, a 450-pound Bengal tiger named Richard Parker, a spotted hyena, and a zebra with a broken leg. The lifeboat is large enough to seat 36 people, but is quite small for four large animals and a teenage boy to share. Once all of the animals, except Richard Parker, the tiger, have died, Pai must rely on the Pacific Ocean to provide him with food. The ocean, with its calm days and stormy ones, is vast, and were it is not for the challenges of hunting for food in these waters, the setting would become rather monotonous for us and Pai. However, because Pai must catch food daily to keep Richard Parker from turning him into a male, his days are work-filled and exhausting. Next, the carnivorous island. When Pai spots the island, not yet knowing it's carnivorous, he's struck by the way the trees seem to stick, not to soil, but to amass vegetation. At first, Pai thinks his eyes are playing tricks on him by showing him a beautiful green island that does not exist. But because he loves the color green, he continues to watch the island from the lifeboat. Finally, the lifeboat reaches the shore, not a beach, as there is neither sand nor pebbles, but a shore all the same. The strangeness continues when Pai eats a mini algae at the base of a tree that exposes its roots. The roots do not go down into soil but intertwine and become one with the algae. Later, Pai climbs up the tree and begins to pick and peel what he thinks is fruit, but in reality, it turns out to be leaves tightly wound around human feet. When Pai realizes he's on carnivorous island, he, along with Richard Parker, returns to the lifeboat and flees the island. However, next we have Mexico and Canada are also important because the locations represent where Pai was found and where he settled down as an adult. Again, Mexico, it is where Pai is rescued, and Canada, where Pai makes a new life for himself. Next reporter, please.
Okay, so this is April Micabala. I'm going to discuss the characters in the story. So the first character we have is Pai, or Pai Patel. He is the main character of the story. He is a teenage Indian boy and a son of a zookeeper. He practiced three religions: Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. So his faith and knowledge of animal psychology helped him survive for 227 days at the sea in a lifeboat with a Bengal tiger. He got his unusual name from the French word for pool, and more specifically from a pool in Paris which a close family friend named Francis Adirubasami loved to swim. So Pai is deeply interested by the habits and characteristic of animals and people. The next character we have is Richard Parker. Richard Parker is the Royal Bengal tiger whom Pi shares the lifeboat with. So the tiger ended up with a human name as a result of a clerical error where the name of the tiger was supposed to be Thirsty and the name of his captor Richard Parker were accidentally reversed. From then on, he was known as Richard Parker. So Richard Parker acts as an omega or a submissive animal respecting Pi dominance. Next slide, please. So next character we have is Santosh Patel. So he is Pi's father and the owner or the keeper of the Pondicherry Zoo. He teaches Pi that the finer points of animal care and control, along with respect for animal strength. Though he was raised as a Hindu, he is not religious and is puzzled by Pi's adoption of numerous religions. So the difficult conditions in India lead him to move his family to Canada. Next one we have Jita Patel. So Jita Patel is Pi's beloved mother and protector. She is a book lover. She encourages Pi to read widely. She was raised as a Hindu with a Baptist education. She does not subscribe to any religion and questions Pi's religious declarations. She speaks her mind, letting her husband know when she disagrees with his parenting techniques. Next slide, please. So next we have Ravi Patel. So Ravi Patel is Pi's older brother who loves to tease Pi. Ravi prefers sports than schoolwork and is quite popular. He teases his younger brother mercilessly over his devotion to three religions, and nonetheless, he and Pi are close to each other. So next one we have Francis Adir Basami. So he is the close friend of the Patel family and a former competitive swimmer. He teaches Pi to swim. So Pi refers to him as Mama G, Mama meaning uncle and G indicating respect and affection. He is also the man who refers the author to Pi for the story that will make you believe in God. Next slide, please. So the next character we have is Father Martin. So Father Martin is the Catholic priest who introduced Pi to Christianity after Pi wanders into his church. He preaches a message of love. He is the Muslim Mr. Kumar and the Hindu Pandit disagree about whose religion Pi should practice. So these are the other characters that is found in the story. First we have the hyena, so an ugly, intensely violent animal who controls the lifeboat before Richard Parker emerged. So we have the zebra. So the zebra is a beautiful male grand zebra. He breaks his leg, jumping into the lifeboat, and the hyena torments him and eats him alive. Next, we have Orange Juice. Orange Juice is the maternal orangutan that floats to the lifeboat on a raft of bananas. She suffers almost human-like of loneliness and seasickness. When the hyena attacks her, she fights back, but nonetheless, she was killed and decapitated. So we have Satish Kumar. Satish Kumar is the biology teacher, the ATS biology teacher of Pi. He's a polio survivor. He's an odd-looking man with a body shaped like a triangle. He's an excellent biology teacher who finds nature to be an illustration of logic of science. He is an ETS, and through him, Pi learns to accept ETS as a believers, but of another faith. His devotion to power of science, inquiry, and explanation inspires Pi to study zoology. So another one we have Satish Kumar, the same name as the biology teacher, but he is a plain featured Muslim mystic. So with the same name of Pi's biology teacher, he is a shoe keeper in the Muslim section of the town. Pi feels that Mr. Kumar's home is a sacred place and learns to practice Islam there. So this Mr. Kumar inspires Pi to study religion. And other one we have Tomohiro Okamoto and Atsuro Chiba. So these two men are from the Japanese Ministry of Transport who arrived on behalf of the Simpson Sinking.
Maybe we will continue next meeting, Shay, and the group.
So we covered 4 stories na product, The Notebook, Pride and Prejudice, A Walk to Remember, and this one, The Life of Pi, will just continue next meeting po, Doc. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And for the attendance, I just care of that one to Miss Cheryl also. This screenshot also have their cell phones there.
Our study entitled Factors of Education and Learning English Network is further students and major in English at College of Teacher Education. I am the leader at the Olympic Studio, and my members are Joanna Bayon and Kristen Aninion.
Okay naman siya, no?
Po, Doc.
Okay.
Everyone's
You may now,
Thank you.
screenshot na, no? Thank you, and you may now go and leave the meet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doc. God bless.
Thank you, Doc.
Goodbye and thank you, Doc.
Goodbye and thank you, Madam.
Goodbye and thank you, Doc.
Bye. Thank you for your presentation.